Good morning. This is Mariana Leon. It's March 1st, 2019, and I'm going to explain very briefly what is the structure of the operation to move capital from Brazil into the US using Bitcoin. So basically, we've been talking about what we could call a transaction schedule. In this sense, basically, what we have is a couple of things that we need to understand and what is the risk of all of it. So the deposit in reais in Brazil, it's a phase that is rather simple because we handle it with an invoice. So when you see deposit in reais, this deposit is going to be made in order to purchase a particular amount of Bitcoin that will be established in that invoice according to our exchange rate. Later on, the Bitcoin port purchase and domestic exchange takes place when our traders in Brazil proceed to buy Bitcoin within a specific margin. So we have a target. The price is defined in order to obtain a particular amount of dollars. For example, let's say we're moving $10,000. So we already know the Bitcoin price that we need to have or our target to assure that we'll get the $10,000. Okay, so this is the work that we do in Brazil in this case. Then we have the trading activity that pertains to a team of traders that handle Bitcoins in different exchanges. So let's say we have some traders in Brazil, other traders in Spain, other traders in the US. So the trading activity deals with the fact that every time you send Bitcoin, you incur a certain cost because of mining. And so what this group of traders does is that controls transaction cost and makes sure that the exit in US dollar is done properly and through a licensed platform in the US so that it can be properly memorialized or recorded in the accounting of the corporation receiving this money. Finally, we will go ahead and execute the sale of Bitcoin in the US dollar exchange that we find appropriate in order to keep the origin of funds and in order to comply with FACTA and other IRS regulation. So why is Bitcoin trading more efficient than banking? Well, basically, time is of the essence here. We really can move capital in the same day or one day to the next with Bitcoin very efficiently. And banks will typically put a hold on everything for days and days and request documentation that they basically do not understand. I mean, all the time that traders or commodities traders or Bitcoin traders are working and moving capital for completely lawful and organized transactions, banks put a hold on the money. So that's one thing to think about. Another thing is that if you think about the exchange rate, in the case of Brazil, just because there is a control exchange rate and exchange regulation that forces you to go through the Central Bank of Brazil, just because of that, you have a transaction cost just to get started with of about 9.5% just in cost. That's not a commission that you're paying. That's got nothing to do with the nature of the money or your business or taxes. It's simple cost. Once you wire to a different country, you incur, banks will take from you another 7 to 8% of the transactions. So we're talking about 17% or between 15 and 17% on the capital as pure cost. With Bitcoin, you're only paying a very small fee for the mining, and you're paying a team of traders and consultants to move the money correctly in compliance with all relevant laws. We calculate that this is about 6.5% in our case. So if you go and do the numbers concerning what it really costs to move money from Brazil into the US, you'll find that our service is far more efficient, at least 50% less cost that you would have by using common banking. In addition to that, this type of transaction allows you to reflect whatever purchase of Bitcoin in different ways. It could be a loan, it could be an investment, it could be anything, and it depends on the contracts that are backing the transaction. Whereas with the bank, it would be a simple exchange, which is a different contract. In this contract, the exchange contract, the exchange for foreign currency contract for a bank is the most profitable one. That's why it's the only option. I mean, you can't go to a bank and say, please give me an exchange rate because I'm going to invest. They don't care. They will give you an exchange, a foreign currency exchange contract, because that's where they can charge whatever they want. So, how it happens? How it happens is that we take reais, and in this segment of the transaction, we're going to bear some cost because we're going to have to buy Bitcoin with reais, which is the local currency in Brazil. And so after we buy it, we will have some small cost here, and that's included in our fees. So then, once we have the Bitcoin, we're going to calculate the right price to sell it in a licensed exchange in the US, which it'll be most likely in the Chamber of Commerce of Chicago, through a platform there. And then we'll calculate the right price and the right moment, considering all charts and indicators of Bitcoin in the US market, to actually land the target capital and deposit it into an LLC account in dollars. Could be an LLC, a corporation, could be an individual. This depends on the nature of the transaction. So it's very important to point out that the transaction must be structured from the beginning. You cannot just start a transaction and suddenly in the middle of the trade change the nature of it, because you'll be you'll be breaching a number of regulations. So it's very important to structure the deal from the start so that when it gets to the entity, whether it's an LLC or a corporation, the purpose and the motive of the transactions is very, very clear. Okay, so doing something like, well, I'll send some money to in my own name and then I'll pass it to the LLC when it's in the US, that's a mistake. You should not do that. You should not just, oh yeah, I'm gonna buy $5,000 and then I'll find a way to transfer it here and it'll be fine. It will not be fine. It will give you problems. So please just bear in mind that the structure of the transaction is very, very important because it'll affect accounting in Brazil, it'll affect accounting in the US, and therefore taxation in both countries. And also, it will affect the origin of funds of your transaction depending on the contract that is backing the operation. So please, you got to bear in mind that you need to structure the deal before it happens. It's not a game, it has real consequences. So, once we have the reais to Bitcoin, this is going to go to a trading account in Brazil. This is an exchange, right? We suggest that a loan contract is what is used to move money from Brazil into the LLC in the US. Why? Because then the LLC in the US can declare that it has a loan. All right, it's a passive. I mean, it's debt. So the way it's regulated is completely different. And in this case, debt gives you a chance to actually evaluate what your result was in this trade. You can evaluate if you really fulfill your targets, if you really had whatever result we were planning on here. For example, if you had additional cost, you can reflect that in the contract later through an amendment and whatnot. However, this is an option. There are many that we have. We have about 5 different options to structure movement of capital. I would suggest the loan contract because it's the easiest and it's very easy to explain and kind of include in an LLC structure. However, just bear in mind this has to be decided before the trading starts. Now, let's say that somebody else is lending you money in Brazil or any other country in local currency. When if they lend you money, then you really need to reflect it as a loan. Also, if you're taking money from a couple of partners, plus you're taking your own money because you want to do an investment in the US, it makes no sense to say that it's a simple purchase or that it is a simple exchange, foreign currency exchange contract, because it's not. It's people putting money together to do something else. So it becomes an investment when the money is really, really effective in an LC account. But what's the nature of that? Is it an investment for the people who put the money in, or is it a loan? How does that work? What was the agreement between the partners? That's very important, okay? So from here to here, you're going to have some cost from the platforms and cost from the traders, but it's never as costly as banks. And this is far more flexible than any other treatment that you can get when moving capital from Latin America or any other country into the US. So moving forward, that's what I needed to explain for a basic test. This could be 5,000, 50,000, or 200,000, doesn't matter. What matters is that it is a structure prior to the trading, and also there must be limits to the movement. For example, I do not recommend to move capital above $50,000 per transaction. So let's say you have 50,000. I would suggest we do one structure for 50,000, and if you're going to move 23,000 in addition to it, then another structure must be set up with a different contract and its own agreements, transactions, and cost, because time is of the essence, and we cannot assume that we will always have the correct market depth in order to move unlimited capital. So market depth, it's an important factor. Liquidity may vary. So when we're moving capital above 50,000, we are risking not having enough Bitcoin to be acquired in a single wire from the account in local currency. So I really, really advise you just to keep it structured in deals of a maximum of $50,000 per trade, and so that this structure is really under control and that your cost is really making sense to you and fulfilling the purpose of moving capital from one jurisdiction into another one. All right, well, I hope this is clear. We're ready to go whenever you are. The contract that we will be using, it's called an irrevocable master fee protection agreement. We can look it over. An example with a commodity, in this case with Russia, just for me, just for the purpose of explaining how it works. So we can see it. We can see it here in this copy. Basically, what happens is that I'll do another video for the contract because it could take a while. So